20 years ago, I asked myself the question, what would D.D. Palmer be teaching if he was alive? Well, how would he be practicing, and what would he be teaching if he was alive today? Now, if you remember back, D.D. Palmer asked himself a question, how was it that two brothers could work in the same shop, eat the same food, sleep in the same bed, and that one would come to a disease while the other would not? And, his efforts to answer that question led to the profession of chiropractic. I want to start out by discussing razors. Razors are heuristics or shortcuts to understanding. So Occam's razor is basically, given all things being equal, the simplest explanation is usually the most correct. In other words, don't multiply variables unless it's necessary. Hanlon's razor is a great one, and that's don't ascribe to malice that which can be explained by stupidity. So I want to speak about in my efforts to answer this question, what would D.D. Palmer be teaching and practicing today? I want to suggest two other razors. One is by Bernardo Kastrup, and he suggests that in a metaphysical argument, and the metaphysical argument he's speaking about here is comparing the primary scientific paradigm that exists today, which would be reductive eliminative materialism, that human beings are biological robots in a meaningless universe, that life is nothing but meat. We're meat puppets. And of course, the other apparently contradictory point of view to that would be that there's a universal intelligence that, in other words, I might not use the term intelligence, but rather universal consciousness, and that there's individual consciousness within living things. Kastrup said, in a metaphysical argument where two or more apparently contradictory points of view are in conflict, the truth tends to be the insight where all parties can say with validity, you see, I was right all along. This is basically a restatement of the blind man and the elephant. An elephant is a column. No, an elephant is a sheet. Elephant is a rope. And then if you can see the elephant from a broader perspective, you can see that they're all describing the same thing. So I sought to find the broader perspective where you could describe chiropractic and everybody could say, see, I was right about chiropractic all along. And then the second razor I used came from Tim Ferriss. In this book, Tribe of Mentors, he interviewed people from all kinds of different fields of endeavors in the world. And he came up with this heuristic where any field can be described by 3 to 5 key principles from which the rest can be extrapolated. And so I spent some time thinking about, well, we have 33 principles, but that's not very parsimonious. It's a over multiplication of principles. Could we narrow it down to what were D.D. Palmer's key principles? And so that I went on a long journey, starting with the 1910 book and then going on to the 1914 book. And I really found the answers when I took a close look at the 1914 book. And so I came up with the following basic 4 concepts. First of all, that the basis of chiropractic is health, that health was the entity. What we might call that chiropractic is a salutogenic model rather than a pathogenic model. So salutogenesis would be the current understanding for the idea of what D.D. Palmer had as what was health. And that there were 3 other primary principles. One was the neuroskeletal tension framework, which we might describe as fractal biotensegrity in this day and age, and tone, which we understand as the principles of neurophysiology, And finally, universal intelligence, which we might consider something like proto-panpsychism in today's scientific understanding. So just to extrapolate on that, if we go back to William Harper, was the president of Texas Chiropractic College back in the 40s and 50s, and I think into the 60s. Harper wrote what I consider one of the greatest never read chiropractic books in existence.
I agree with that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So Harper's book is great. No one ever read it. I heard that fellow chiropractic student in 1982 told me the phrase, "Well, anything can cause anything." That's one of the prime principles of chiropractic, meaning it's nonlinear. An insult anywhere in the nervous system can produce a effect anywhere in the nervous system. And so Harper focused on the fact that health was the entity that we focus on in chiropractic. In other words, salutogenesis, not pathogenesis, as in medicine. And of course, Clarence Gonstead said something very similar. Medicine is the study of disease, and what causes a man to die. And chiropractic is the study of health, and what causes a man to live. And so that we are a salutogenic model of health rather than a pathogenic model of health. And you can reframe D.D. Palmer's question into the question that the father of salutogenesis, Antonovsky, phrased. And he said, "Well, why does it's not why one gets sick; it's why do some manage to avoid illness and do well even under extreme stress?" And we would say because they have the ability to adapt to it, and their ability to adapt is not interfered with by vertebral subluxation, among other kinds of interferences to adaptation. So then salutogenesis and health would be the first of the in this case, I'm saying there's 4 key principles of chiropractic. And the second, D.D. Palmer described in his 1914 book, which I would vote as being another one of the greatest books in chiropractic that no one's ever read. And that is the principle of the neuroskeletal tension framework. Why we don't hear more about this, why this isn't the basic understanding of chiropractic beastly. We might, in modern terms, we might call the neuroskeletal tension framework a fractal biotensegrity concept. And I'll go on to elaborate a little bit. So I think the best quote about this whole idea of the neuroskeletal tension framework really comes from Joe Keating in an article he wrote in Dynamic Chiropractic of all places. And he said the following quote: "At the end of his career, Didi came to see that nerve impulses were a vibrational phenomena. This would be like the concept of soliton nerve conduction, and behaved like guitar strings. He imagined that the nervous system was a meshwork of fine threads stretched out across the skeletal structure of the body. I always think of this as like a spider web in the corner of a frame, and if you alter the frame, you're going to change the pull on the spider web. When one or more of the joints subluxated in the spine or elsewhere, this would tend to stretch or relax the nerves, thereby altering communication to end organs." So, and then Keating goes on to say, although old Dad Cairo may have originated the foot on the hose model, he certainly had abandoned it by the time he reached Portland, and this would be where he wrote his 1910 book, The Chiropractor's Adjuster, which of course was titled The Chiropractor's Adjuster because Didi was seeking to adjust the thinking of his students who have seemed to have gotten off track. And he made a big point, the following big point. Some authors, and he was speaking about Langworthy, Paxton, and Smith in their 1906 book, Modernized Chiropractic. Some authors state that nerves are pinched because of occluded intervertebral foramina. This is the vertebrae is subluxated, the IVF is closed up, and so that the nerve is pinched. And Dee Dee makes a big point. It's not about being pinched. It's about being impinged. So if we go to the Dee Dee's model of the violin or guitar, the bridge, and we're looking at a bridge of a violin, the bridge of the violin doesn't pinch the nerves, it impinges upon them or stretches the nerves or relaxes. So, you adjust the pitch on, you can adjust the intonation on a guitar or a violin by adjusting the bridge, and that changes the tension of the nerve, which changes the vibratory rate. So, and we can go on to that, use an example both of the guitar, and then we see a Stratocaster with it's also the whammy bar. And so the arch or bar of a violin or guitar or other stringed instruments causes the wires or the strings to be tense, stretchly. It does not prevent the passage of vibration. In fact, it is designed to allow the passage of vibration. So an impingement modifies tensions, changes the amount of vibration, and doesn't obstruct the course of impulse. It simply augments or decreases the force of the impulse. And we're going to see from later evidence that D.D. Palmer was probably right. So Dee imagined the nervous system as a fine meshwork of threads stretched out across the skeletal structure. This is just a reiteration. When one of the joints subluxate, it's going to tend to stretch or relax nerves. The bones serve as a neuroskeletal tension frame. So the bones act. This is a whole lever principle that, as a curve goes from, say, your cervical curve goes from a healthy cervical curve to a reverse cervical curve, that stretches the spinal cord. And we know that from the work of Al Brieg, his book. This was probably another one of those most important books in chiropractic that no one's ever read. You can now, because it used to be $1,000 a copy. I happen to have spent the money and got a copy years and years ago, but now you can get it for like $20. And Bragg demonstrated that, for example, when the spine was extended, the cord was relaxed. We see that in the cut on the right-hand side with the cervical extension and the cord relaxing, and that when the neck was flexed or the cervical curve was reversed, that the cord came under tension. And then we see that this principle has been validated, what many might be called the Holy Grail experiment, recently published by Dean Harrison and his colleagues at the University of Cairo in Nature. Demonstration of central conduction time and neuroplastic changes after cervical lordosis rehabilitation in asymptomatic subjects, a randomized placebo-controlled trial. Basically, this demonstrates that you have a healthy cervical curve, you have normal nerve conduction and normal integration of the information into the frontal cortex. People who have loss of normal cervical curve have reduction in the conduction time and disorganization of the information reaching the frontal cortex. And then if you restore cervical curve in those patients using chiropractic approaches, that you restore normal nerve conduction and information integration. So basically validating in a scientific manner for the first time the basic chiropractic principle of the neuroskeletal tension framework. And then the next concept we go on to would be the principle of tone, which comes from the 1910 book originally. We might call that neurophysiology, and these would be all the functional neurology approaches to chiropractic, whereas the neuroskeletal tension framework probably consists of more of the structural approaches to chiropractic. You'll hear statements by people like Carrick saying, adjustments don't remove tension from nerves, they put tension on mechanoreceptors, which is true. And once again, this is not about, and you will also hear researchers like Heidi Havoc say that, basically discounting structural considerations at all. Apparently they've never read Bragg and they don't understand what it says. So once again, I'm proposing that there's a bigger picture from which everyone can say, "Oh, see, I'm right." And so Didi said that chiropractic is a science based on tone, and so the key element, I think, in his description of tone is this term renitency, which means a bounding back or reflex action, and this is what we come to call the safety pin. That when we're model is that when you're adjusted, that the body and brain are connected, and that when there's a subluxation, this reflex action, this bounding back, the responsiveness of protoplasm is lost, and this comes from the principle of the irritability of protoplasm. It's like when you touch an earthworm, it contracts, it responds. That a amoeba, a single cell, that's what that picture is. I actually studied it's actually a tetrahymera. My PhD research is in the molecular genetics of tetrahymera, comparing the micronuclei and the macronuclei, and what at the time was called the molecular biology of development, and is now called the epigenetics. So it's the principle, the quality of irritability, which gives tone, which means the ability of the ability of protoplasm to respond and move towards food, towards the mate, or move away from danger and away from noxious stimulus. And this seems to be a fundamental property of living tissues. We could go on to talk more about neurophysiology, but then I'm going to go on to the final principle of D.D. Palmer's chiropractic. The major premise of chiropractic, there's a universal intelligence in all matter, which continually gives to it its properties in action, thus maintaining its in existence. In modern philosophical language, we'd probably call this something like proto-panpsychism, saying that the potential for consciousness exists in all matter, and if matter becomes organized in a certain manner, then you have conscious sentient beings like ourselves, who are not merely biological robots in a meaningless universe, or not merely meat puppets, but are conscious beings, and reflecting what Schrodinger. All the founders of quantum physics were basically mystics who believed in the concept that there was a consciousness. And so, for example, Schrodinger said individual consciousness is only manifestation of a unity consciousness pervading the universe. So in physics, we understand that mass, spin, and charge are the fundamental properties of the universe, and modern physicists will think that consciousness should be included. For example, Sir Roger Penrose, who actually was last year's winner of the Nobel Prize in Physics, has said that consciousness is part of our universe, so that any physical theory which makes no proper place for it falls short of providing a genuine description of the world. So we're starting to see that D.D. Palmer's idea of universal intelligence, or what may be more properly called universal consciousness and individual consciousness, is gaining a foothold in science. And finally, D.D. said the universe is speaking the same way. The universe is composed of intelligence and matter. Matter is neither intelligent nor creative, while intelligence is omnipresent, filling all space. This creative intelligence uses material substance for the expression of life, and life is the direct result of intelligence seeking advancement towards perfection. So I would propose that those are D.D. Palmer's 4 key principles of chiropractic. And when we look at a bigger picture like that, we can understand that, it's like a tree growing towards the sun. D.D. Palmer had a certain central thesis. The branches of a tree may radiate 360-degree different direction. You may choose in practice to focus on a philosophically principle-driven practice, which means that's a practice really based on the concept of universal intelligence. You may focus on a practice based on altering or changing or ameliorating the neuroskeletal tension framework. Those would be like practices like chiropractic biophysics, which I practice in addition to practicing principled straight chiropractic. And you might also practice a neurophysiologically based practice like Carrick and Havoc and various others, which is based on ameliorating neurophysiology. Once again, these are only just part of a broader concept of as the IFCO would call, say, how to phrase it, that chiropractic is a salutogenic model of vertebral subluxation centered care. So I think that if Dee Dee Palmer was alive and practicing and teaching in 2022, that he would be practicing a salutogenic model of vertebral subluxation centric care, but it would take into account these multiple principles of universal intelligence, neuroskeletal tension framework, tone, and salutogenesis. That's it in a nutshell.
Going through that was, I really love this PowerPoint, and I got a lot out of it just now. And, just taking in that concept, I haven't really thought about how he would be practicing. I've always thought of, what would Dee Dee think of chiropractic now? What do you think of where we've come as a profession itself?
Well, obviously, we've moved things forward on a number of fronts. We've refined our understanding of these principles. So I would hope that he would see that as a positive.
I think so too, yeah.
The conflicts that exist today existed from day one.
That's right, yeah. It's nothing new. It's not, definitely not.
These are new conflicts in the profession. These have been there since before the beginning. So I'm proposing that we follow Kastrup's razor in any metaphysical argument, and this is basically a metaphysical argument. Those who want to say that only the neuroskeletal tension framework is the only concern of chiropractic, or that neurophysiology is the only concern of chiropractic, or a principled practice, meaning a practice based on panpsychism and universal intelligence, is the only form of chiropractic. Or if you want to say that, well, our focus is health and salutogenesis, so then, we should be able to have chiropractic weight loss clinics and nutritional chiropractic. I would have to say yes, that does fall, or using lasers or whatever you want to do. Yes, I can see that in a broad concept. If we look at the whole elephant, yes, that does fall within the elephant. However, maybe we need to see the whole elephant and not just focus on, as the blind men, and one aspect of the elephant. And I am suggesting that we need to have a greater respect for the whole big picture.
Yeah.
And have unity professionally without uniformity.
I like that quote. That's actually, I'm on board with that. Yeah.
The California Chiropractic Association, it's always been said that trying to organize chiropractic is like herding cats.
Yeah.
It's impossible to do. So I want to propose that that there is a bigger picture by which we can all just get along under.
Last night on our Synapse podcast, or it was Tuesday night. One thing we talked about, I've thought of was BJ trying to unify chiropractic with a neurocolometer and upper cervical. And, trying to come under one roof and trying to keep control and uniformity. Do you think that was maybe his intention?
I think it was one of the great misfires in the history of chiropractic. Historically, it caused a lot of division because you could only rent them from Palmer Chiropractic.
Right. Yeah.
Rent an exorbitant. I think it was a great misstep.
Yeah, I think that is a consensus and a conclusion too.
It did not have its intended effect. In fact, it caused. It was one of numerous things that caused splintering in the profession. I think we need to get back to these fundamentals and start to see a bigger picture and seek unity rather than uniformity.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for that. What
I like to practice a salutogenic-based, subluxation-centric model of chiropractic. That's my personal choice. Now, how I apply that may be very different, and I'm sure it is. That may be very different to how other people might seek to apply a salutogenic vertebral subluxation-based practice. But I see the underlying principle. I think I see the real underlying principles of chiropractic, and I'm focusing on staying true to those principles and not any kind of reductionistic cookie cutter model of chiropractic.
A question I know is going to come up is where does
BJ did it this way, and this is the only way to do it.
Yeah, one of my mentors was Clarence Jensen at Clearview. He was at Clearview with BJ, and he taught me BJ's X-ray analysis, and he still did what he called Palmer specific, and he stayed in that model his whole life, served thousands of people. But I know there's a whole lot of room really to not to expand chiropractic, but our consciousness of chiropractic.
Yeah, isn't it Clarence Gonstead who said, when chiropractic, and it actually might have been, he was from Minnesota, I don't remember his name. He adjusted me once, this other guy. It was the head of, it was president of the International ICA for a long time, Fred Barge, okay? So I think it said, listen, if chiropractic doesn't seem to be working, you should re-examine your application of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are other ways to apply chiropractic, and maybe I think John DeMartini said, as we've discussed before, said something really intelligent. He said, the type of approach used just determines what type of cases you attract. If you're doing craniosacral work, maybe you're going to attract a lot of infants, and if you're doing chiropractic biophysics to restore cervical curves, you're going to maybe attract a lot of autoaccident cases or post-autoaccident case patients who had a lot of trauma that way. So, and if you have a nutritional-based practice or maybe a functional neurology kind of practice, you're just going to attract different types of clients. The results you get are more based on, as he would say, your present time consciousness. How are you applying the technique? And the number of people you see is going to be a function of how enthusiastic you are about what you're doing. So I always thought that was a pretty intelligent statement.
It is, absolutely. I'm looking for a quote right now from Dede. He said, physicians work with the physical, chiropractors work with the physical and the spiritual. And I'm pretty sure it was from 1910, around page 9 or 10. And I'm looking for it right now. I can't find it, but that's not what's important. And, that is, go ahead.
Bill Bain's uncle, George Shear, put it real well. He said, chiropractic has just enough of the physical in it to not be faith healing.
Oh, there you go. I like that. Now, in those three models, someone's going to ask me, what?
Those are models. I would say those are four key principles upon which the field can be described, and then the rest of the principles can be extrapolated from those key principles of health, tone, the neuroskeletal tension framework, and universal intelligence. To use them in D.D. Palmer's terms, and in modern language, we might describe those key principles as the principles of fractal biotensegrity, of various neurophysiological principles, such like the reflex arc and salutogenesis, and maybe universal intelligence would be best described in current philosophical terms as proto-panpsychism.
There's a lot of meat to this presentation you just gave. I appreciate it. I'm glad.
When you're trying to see the big picture, you have to have a big picture to look at.
Yeah, it was helpful because, we went through a lot of this the other day when we spoke, and I got a lot out of this. I got 4 or 5 pages of notes, and this did make it easier to digest, which is excellent, and I truly, really appreciate it.
This presentation is a subset of a much larger presentation.
Okay, but we can go into more of that at another time.
Yeah, each one of these principles or key principles obviously can be extrapolated to the whole of the profession. I guess that's the whole point, to see the elephant, not the parts of the elephant. Or as Bernardo Castro would say, is look for the point of view from which everybody could say, see, I was right all along.
Right, yeah.
I think perspective like this allows all the different factions of chiropractic to say, see, I was right all along. That is the basis of chiropractic. It's just perspective, as that the diagram of the square, circle, and triangle represent. You could say, oh no, chiropractic is a square. No, chiropractic is a circle. No, it's a triangle. Well, actually, it's all of the above. It's just how you look at it.
I just taught a seminar in Brazil this past weekend, via the internet. And, the main reason for doing it is to bring unity to chiropractic and to our chiropractors really around the world. And, this is a big step towards that. And I think it's not just time for it, it's necessary for chiropractors to see themselves united, instead of so compartmentalized and separated.
That's why I spent 20 years thinking about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Finding it and looking for the evidence to support it, and trying to understand each of these 4 key principles, and do they really reflect are these really the 4 key principles of chiropractic? And I believe they are.
Yeah, and as you've gone through them, I really start seeing the work that you've done, and it's made something that has been, in reality, we've made it very complex, into somewhat simplify. There's no way to really simplify, but in using the science to create an easier, I just say, an easier to digest model, or 3 models, wherever we fit in them, or in between each one, and creating unity. I see a lot of value in this. Thank you.
Well, once again, that's the purpose of a razor, is to a heuristic. A razor or a heuristic is a shortcut to understanding. Okay. And complicated topics. So how do you got to present students some kind of a shortcut to get the. How do you get the big idea, right? That's the whole point. You get the big idea, and all else follows. That's the same. That's just a restatement, basically, of Harris's razor, that any field can be described by 3 to 5 key principles from which the rest can be extrapolated. Understand the big idea, and then everything else can be extrapolated from it. And I would say that these 4 key principles are the big idea of chiropractic.
Yeah, absolutely. I see. How do you now going into BJ just a moment? How would you see BJ practicing today, or view of chiropractic today? How do you think BJ would be practicing? Even though he did most of his time in research.
I think you'd probably be doing exactly. He seemed to be the kind of guy that would be doing exactly what he was doing. I for many years, my personal chiropractor was Lyle Sherman's last private patient, student. He taught individual students on the side.
I didn't know that.
Chiropractic, and the doctor that I saw for many years was his last private student before he passed away. And of course, Lyle Sherman was B.J. Palmer's chiropractor. So I think I have pretty good understanding of what that kind of chiropractic was, having had received torque toggle adjustments for a decade from someone who is a real expert in it.
Yeah. Thank you for that perspective.
But while it is a useful approach, like as D. Martini would say, it's certain types of cases that's useful for, and other types of cases, maybe other approaches would be more useful for. I always was a principled pragmatist. I just didn't know that there was a name for that. And then I found out a decade ago, oh, that's what a Stoic is. So a Stoic is a principled pragmatist. In other words, you have principles, but you're pragmatic about the application of them. And so, for example, pragmatist might be the scientific materialistic model, and the principled approach might be the 33 principles kind of approach, what people might call a straight principled chiropractic practice. And I'm suggesting that a Stoic approach, which is a balancing of pragmatism and principles, might be a more useful approach.
Zale, I've got to go in about a minute or two. We've got to go. I got to go help my wife. And is there anything you'd like to, the last thing, maybe to wrap this up, or any last input?
No, I think it really speaks for itself.
It does.
I really do like the concept that basically that chiropractic is that we should focus on a salutogenic model of vertebral subluxation centric care as being really the core of chiropractic. I would think that this is sort of a refined explanation of what that means.